I'm sure you've seen plenty of lists by now of movies that got fixed by last-minute changes, films that were just given a whole new, deeper meaning by things that the filmmakers only thought of at the last second. Well, today we're going to turn that on its head and talk about something less uplifting. Because, sometimes life isn't fair and things get ruined. Something you put all your love and hard work into can be foiled by executives on a whim. Yes, horror movies can be more subversive than other things, but they still have to be profitable, and the commercial arm is always stronger. So I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are 8 horror movies ruined by last-minute changes. Number 8, I Am Legend, The Disappointing Ending. I Am Legend is based off a book by Richard Matheson, showcasing his innovative zombie-vampire hybrid-type monsters. The novel has a fittingly thought-provoking ending, in which the survivor protagonist finds out that the monsters are actually kind of the new evolution of the human race. They're just as sentient as he is, with thoughts and feelings, and they hate him because he has slaughtered their kind. He realizes now that he's just a relic of the past, he's unevolved, and the world has outgrown him. Stunning, right? Well, instead of sticking to that, test audiences said they'd rather have something easy to swallow. The original ending was binned and replaced with the whole Will Smith makes a cure then sacrifices himself shtick, which is just as predictably predictable as it is meaningless. 7. Exorcist: The Beginning, a complete overhaul. It's not a good start to say that this film went through not 1, not 2, but 3 directors before reaching its final form. However, it's at least a fitting starting point for explaining its failings. First up to bat was John Frankenheimer, best known perhaps for The Manchurian Candidate. But it all started going downhill when he stepped down before his death. He was replaced by Paul Schrader, who immediately started going rogue in opposition to what the film's backers were requesting. Contrary to the brief, he wanted a relatively bloodless, psychological slow burn vibe, and he went at it with confidence. In fact, he managed to complete his film in its entirety before handing it to producers and soaking in their shock. It is certainly a whole new breed of last minute to replace and change everything about a film when the whole thing is already made. But they did it anyway. Schrader was kicked to the curb and replaced with Rennie Harlin, who overhauled the whole thing. Scripts were rewritten, scenes were reshot, footage was re-edited, characters were added and deleted. Basically, the whole thing was a mess. Characters and events were inconsistent with canon, scenes felt patched together, and overall audiences hugely disliked the movie. Some would say maybe it would have been better to just leave it how it was. 6. Brazil, a palatable ending. It's a film that is nonetheless regarded by many as a masterpiece, but Brazil does have one very controversial aspect, that being its ending, or rather, its endings. Whilst the darker, sadder ending was released to Europe without a problem, US distributors Universal feared that the Americans weren't ready for that kind of complex emotion. Looking at a fully completed, released film, they said, no, I want to change that. A new edit which cut out huge amounts of important footage was created. The ending was changed so that Sam's dream is never revealed to be a product of insanity, and the plot focuses more on relationships and fun action pieces than, well, anything. The entire film loses its gravity when shaved down to a 90-minute straight-to-TV format. But I guess Universal figured that that's exactly what America wanted. 5. CRIMEWAVE, Sinister Shemping. Now yes, I know I'm using shemping wrong here. It mostly refers to the use of a stand-in body double in takes, not calling in stand-ins for all parts of production. The studio may well have gotten angry at Sam Raimi for using crew as stand-ins in shots, but they didn't hesitate to hire staff to push him and collaborator Bruce Campbell out of production in post. Most of the production of this horror comedy noir mishmash was a nightmare, but what foiled any potential for it coming together was the studio's late decision to push the film's creators out of its cutting. Raimi and Campbell were at odds with their stakeholders right from the get-go, with their vision and creative control being constantly stifled. Essentially, the only 2 men with the big picture understanding and intention for the film were criminally underutilized and repeatedly ignored. When the movie reached post, it could have been just enough to let them pull it all together using their creative prowess and lateral thinking. Instead of this though, the production company Embassy banned the duo from being involved in the editing, replacing them with an unrelated editor of their choosing. Because of its nature, it's unlikely the film was ever gonna bang at the box office, but the hasty and petty ousting of the film's creators definitely can't have helped its eventual form. 4. Hannibal, the new Clarice. Hannibal, of course, features Anthony Hopkins in his most infamous role, but when audiences got to the cinema, the Clarice opposite him was not the one they once expected. The Silence of the Lambs set up the cannibal cop duo with unshakable boldness and confidence. Audiences deeply connected with the pair, 50% of which was made up by Jodie Foster. Fast forward a decade and the film became a staple of modern horror, and unfortunately a sequel was never going to live up to expectations. This was of course due to a number of things, but one of the very important ones is that relatively late into that time period, the production lost Foster. From the moment that Silence author Thomas Harris began writing his sequel novel, the first film's director Jonathan Demme had stated he was on board to direct, and Foster expressed excitement to star. Wheels were turning, studios were pushing forward, and then the two of them actually read the book. It does feel almost mean to say, but the two of them hated Harris's new book so much that they both immediately changed their minds on the film. The direction he took, Clarice's development, they found it so awful they couldn't bear to participate in trampling the character that way. The truth is that without both central stars from the original, the sequel could never shine, and Foster was well and truly done with it. 3 from Hell, writing out Spaulding. There are bad changes you can blame on production or people, but then there are also changes that unfortunately nobody can really control. The removal of Captain Spaulding from 3 from Hell was one of the latter, a change required as actor Sid Haig was in ill health and became unable to dedicate to a larger part. Otis, Baby and Spaulding should be the 3 in question from the title. If you're going to have the number in the title, people are going to assume it's the 3 that they know, and in a weird way, I guess, love. Originally this was the plan. The film was written with the gang getting back together, but Haig's situation necessitated thorough rewriting. In his place, not as a recast, just a shoe filler, they brought a new character, Otis's half-brother Winslow Foxworth Foxy Coltrane, who beforehand was due to have a much smaller appearance. He was no great replacement, meaning that a lot of fans found the whole thing an underwhelming letdown with none of the appeal to get them in. It may have been an unavoidable change, but it did do its bit to ruin the experience. 2. The Invasion. No room for story. We all love a half-hearted rehash of the classics, don't we? I know I do, especially when they involve about 17 different directors, 3 different working titles, and the breaking of Nicole Kidman's ribs in a freak Jaguar accident. That's a joke, I'm sorry Nicole, I don't mean you any harm. One Wall Street Journal review actually summed up the problems with this film incredibly concisely, stating that between all the typical Hollywood fodder, there isn't much time for storytelling. The reason behind this can be traced to a number of last-minute edits and reshoots being commissioned following the studio's disappointment in director Oliver Hirschspiegel's minimalist first go. The Wachowski sisters were enlisted to re-script and tweak the film alongside a number of others. Over $10 million went into reshoots, and over a year after the initial wrap, they shot a whole new twist ending. The final product was a taped-together jumble of the original scenes, reshoots, and new effects and plot beats. So, in an effort to make the film commercially appealing, the studio instead rendered it barely watchable. 1. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. Bad luck, Burlinger. It may be the ramblings of a man trying to make up for his own inadequacies, or it might be the absolute truth that the last-minute alterations to Book of Shadows left it in the absolute state we know it as. Whether you believe this or not just depends on how much you trust Joe Burlinger. Burlinger took on the project with the intention of directing the Blair Witch mythos away from the supernatural and more into human evil. Already some people may be rolling their eyes, stating that means he missed the point, but in the end, this isn't actually what killed the movie. The new approach wasn't a bad idea in itself, and it had the potential to be interesting. Burlinger wanted to make the whole thing somewhat of a meditation on mass hysteria, just like the kind that arose after the original film was released and a bunch of media-illiterate idiots thought it was a real documentary. Unfortunately for him, this isn't what the backers had in mind. It doesn't exactly scream sexy Hollywood banger, and so in post-production they took his contemplative baby and butchered it. They made it into what they think is a commercially viable piece, complete with cringy special effects and shoehorned in on-screen violence. I mean, the footage of the protagonists murdering tourists we glimpse in flashes was literally shot a couple of weeks before the film's release, right in Burlinger's back garden. That's how close to the line they were. In the end, it was the studio meddling that ruined it all. And honestly, none of us can say we're surprised. And with that, we've reached the end of this list of 8 horror movies ruined by last-minute changes. What do you think of these movies, and do you know any others that were changed big time last minute, for worse or better? Also, remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. And I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.